Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX141 Walsh, welcoming you to an all new World of Warships gameplay today on our channel. In this episode it is not I sailing out, but a good friend and long-time subscriber of this channel known as MiaYosh, who is sailing out in his own Tier 5 Soviet premium cruiser known as the Murmansk. This is a Tier 5 domination game on the map Strait, and Mia is joined by his good friend Fire Draco, who is sailing out in their own Tier 5 Soviet premium battleship known as the October Revolution. The purpose of today's gameplay is for Mia to showcase to us why the Murmansk is a rather powerful cruiser and one not to ignore, particularly when it's in a top tier position, whereby Mia is going to apply the key strengths of this ship in order to help his team secure the victory, or at least try to. Now, as Mia makes his way towards Charlie, it's worth pointing out that Mia is using at least a 14-point skill captain, whereby he has a good number of skills that we need to take account of. Firstly, Concealment Expert, dropping the detectability by sea of the ship from approximately 13 km down to what is 11.2 km. This is a key change because the detectability otherwise of the ship is quite punishing, where the maximum gun range of this ship as standard being 14.8 km before you integrate the spotter aircraft, which Mia is not going to use at any point during the course of this game. Having mitigated the poor detectability then, we also have to consider that Mia is running a combination of Demolition Expert, which buffs the high explosive fire chance from a base of 12% to 14%, and then it's dropped back down to 11% through the usage of IFAG, or Inertia Fuse for high explosive shells, whereby these 152mm artillery pieces, 10 in total, 2 on the front in the turret, 2 in the rear in the turret, and then 6 on the sides, 3 to each side, we'll see that the penetration of the high explosive shells goes from the standard 25mm up to 32mm, giving Mia the ability to land a lot of high explosive shells on the top armour, either deck armour of enemy battleships, and we're going to see a good number of examples throughout this game, and cause quite a significant amount of damage, and with 11% fire chance still, set a considerable number of fires. Now, Mia being the front line at this point, heading towards the enemy New York, he's already been spotted, so we have to think that there's an enemy cruiser a little bit closer towards Mia, and we can see an Emil Batin, and we can see a Danai, the British cruiser, which was a lot closer before it was spotted compared to Mia's own ship. So we can see the weak concealment of this ship being punished somewhat in terms of early detection. But Mia's going to use the great manoeuvrability of his ship in order to kite away, frustrating the enemy New York into a point where they're just going to act as a barbecue, a sailing barbecue in fact, whereby Mia's got the ability to shift his rudder in 3.8 seconds and has a top speed of 34 knots, making him a very difficult target to hit. And it's important he kites where possible and avoids the incoming fire, particularly from that New York, because with only 6 to 36mm of armour, Mia's ship's not going to hold up when it gets hit. That's the thing about the Murmansk. It can do a good amount of damage, but keep in mind that if you do give a broadside and are punished for it, you'll be punished quite severely, just like you would in the Tier 5 American counterpart, the Omaha, on which the ships are very similar. I believe they're historically based, but don't quote me on that. Now, Mia continuing to rain down fire on the New York, he turns underneath the New York, and it is worth noting he's not using the priority target captain skill. We don't have an indicator in the top right corner of the detected indicator to say how many ships are targeting Mia. Instead, he's just using visual cues, looking for the ships shooting at him and listening out for when shells are landing near him. Bit of a risky way of playing, but it seems to be paying off so far. As Mia continues to dump fire, we note that the enemy New York was smart in that they put out their second fire only after it was scored. They didn't put out the first fire immediately, which means they absorbed a considerable amount of fire bleed damage before they tried to get rid of it and try to perhaps get away. Alternatively, just seemingly sail close to their friendly ships to try and gradually whittle down the health of Mia and his colleagues. But it's not paying out for that New York, because another set of fires will be set soon by Mia, and it means that the New York is just going to gradually burn to death. But more important at this point, we can also see a considerable amount of tunnel visioning being done by Mia and his colleagues down in the south. Because if we look at the mini-map right now, we can see that an enemy Clemson has been allowed to get extremely close to a lone Iron Duke on Mia's team who sailed towards Bravo. And that Clemson is going to shred the Iron Duke with his torpedoes in a few seconds, and we can also see the Danai from earlier rotating from Bravo back down towards Charlie now. In return, what this means is that the enemy Clemson is now coming around the northern side of Mia's position, and as Mia is accidentally sailing towards it by the looks of things, and paid no attention to actually turning his guns or anything towards the Clemson so far, that Clemson is going to come up on him gradually. And in return, as he moves away from his friendly battleships, it means that he's going to isolate himself into a small open pocket of sea against the Clemson, and potentially the Danai as well. Although it does look as though Mia's friend, IFRL, is moving his battleship up to support Mia, so it's a nice bit of interplay between the two teammates here, whereby they're working closely together to keep with each other, meaning that Fyrell, where possible, is going to tank damage in his battleship. That's what battleships typically do, whilst Mia is going to be the continuous stream of high explosive death. Having taken out the New York, he's now switching to the Kaiser, and his first salvo he's going to immediately set afire, and we'll see a rinse and repeat of what happened to the New York happen to the Kaiser most likely. Outside of that, what's happening up in the north? Well, things aren't looking too good in the north either. With 2 friendly battleships becoming isolated against a considerable portion of the enemy fleet, the enemy team have 2 caps to Mia's team's 1, and the points advantage is swinging towards the enemy team currently. What if Mia's team also having lost 1 additional ship? Now it's 2. They've lost their V170, which means that their entire destroyer presence in the game is completely out, and the enemy team's still got its Clemson. So they do have the stealth advantage in terms of being able to position 1 ship in particular, i.e. a destroyer, around the map and contest caps. But at this point, Mia gets an awakening, what with broadside damage coming in from the enemy Danai, who's throwing in their armour-piercing shells. Fortunately for Mia, those shells haven't landed too accurately, enabling Mia the time to be able to turn away before potentially taking a citadel or considerable penetration damage. Having set a fire on the Danai, he's starting to pull back even further, moving away from the threat and throwing down some torpedoes, and with their 8-kilometre range perhaps they'll hit the target. But just as he's moving away from the Danai, he's going to get surprised by another set of torpedoes from the enemy Clemson. In 3, 2, 1 by the looks of things, here they are. And having seen the torpedoes, they've been fired a little bit adrift of Mia's chosen path direction. He throws down his hydroacoustic consumable and he spots the Clemson, but he hasn't got torpedoes to lay down, having just used them against the enemy Danai. But what he can tell is that that Clemson is coming around for a torpedo salvo off the other side of their ship, while them having 2 triple sets on each side. He dodges the first set by turning against it, and then comes around and notices the other set coming in, and he's going to have to dodge those at last minute. In return, opening fire with his other set of torpedoes, the other triple set mounted down the port side, and he gets them right on the bow of that Clemson and is going to wipe them out of the match, having just about dodged the second set from what was effectively the starboard side of the Clemson coming towards him. That was very closely knit there, and goes to show the great manoeuvrability of the Murmansk and how it played out for Mia. Now in return, he's opening fire on the enemy Danai, and he's going to use his armour-piercing shells to absolutely shred that enemy cruiser. What of his good friend Fyrell also having done considerable damage using high explosive by looks of things against the bow of that Danai, whereby per citadel of armour-piercing, Mia's going to be doing 3,100 damage in the Murmansk, and it's paying off here, picking up the occasional citadel and not even having to get a clean broadside on the Danai to do so. Even when they're angled, their limited armour means that he's going to be picking up citadels and penetrations every so often. And in fact, when the Danai goes full broadside, Mia starts picking up over penetrations, but he makes up for it in this following salvo and takes them out. With 3 kills to his name now, he immediately switches target to the Königsberg, and Mia's really awake at this point. He seems to be picking on targets of opportunity and the ideal targets as well. Noticing that Königsberg's given a little bit of broadside, although it's heavily angled, picking up a couple of penetrations there, making sure not to drift into the now dead Danai's torpedoes, and he notices the MiaYosh firstly, and then the Emil Batin, who's moving their way southwards through Charlie, and with the Emil being on very low health, as Mia tries to score a quick fire on the MiaYosh, he decides it's time to finish off the Emil, who's throwing down their own torpedoes, those having quite devastating range from what I can recall. I think it's 10 kilometres, don't quote me on that. 1 high explosive salvo was all that was needed because of the accuracy of that salvo, while the fact there's a maximum dispersion of 135 metres, a standard at 14.8 kilometres in Murmansk. The shells are quite accurate with their decent range, and now he's throwing a little bit of armour piercing against the MiaYosh, and we can see here that the armour piercing just isn't working out at such long range against that battleship's armour. So he's switching to high explosive, and he's going to try using the same tactics as before, as what he used against the New York, and then switch to on the Kaiser. Burn the bugger down. And hopefully it will pay off. But in the meantime, let's take a quick recap of what's happening on the map. It looks as though it's now a situation, it's a 4 versus 3, not in Mia's favour, whereby the enemy team have got all 3 caps as well. So what is his team doing? They're all consolidating towards Objective Charlie. They need to get at least 1 cap to stay in the game effectively by taking away the ability for the enemy team to build up points at a considerable rate. As even if no ships are sunk, the enemy team's getting what is 9 points every few seconds compared to Mia's team getting none until they sink a ship. Mia switches back to armour piercing, hoping to perhaps do a little bit more damage to that MiaYosh now that they're a bit closer, but the armour piercing just isn't quite cutting it, so he goes back to high explosive once again. And it's at this point we should come onto the torpedoes of Murmansk. What are they like? Well, they've got an 8-kilometre range, which is rather catchy, and it can catch a lot of foes by surprise, and we get the feeling Mia may have thrown those torpedoes towards the MiaYosh, expecting them to turn towards him rather than away. On top of that, the torpedoes will do a maximum damage of 14,400 HP, which is a very nice amount. They've got a 69-second reload on these 2 triple sets, mounted 1 to each side with a rather considerable torpedo angle. But they're rather slow with a top speed of 55 knots, so they're going to catch people out over time. And Now coming back to the action, Mia's trying to bring down one of the 2 cruisers, focusing first on the Königsberg, who's really laying a good number of shells down. Meanwhile, the enemy Murmansk seems to be very focused on bringing down Mia's teammate, i.e. Virel. But Mia switched towards the enemy Murmansk at this point, noticing that it's the greater threat, and what with the Königsberg moving away, Mia's not going to be in effective range to bring down that Königsberg for much longer, as they're burnt to death by Mia's friendly Wyoming. So he continues to lay his fire down on the Murmansk at this point, and what is worth noting is that the considerable muzzle velocity on the 152mm cannon on the Murmansk makes it quite easy to provide appropriate lead, where the muzzle velocity on both shell types initially being 914 meters per second, and we can see that at distances in excess of 10 kilometers, finding the right lead is not too difficult. The enemy MiaYosh is on rather limited health. It's caught off towards the southwestern side of Objective Bravo by itself, having just under 3,000 health by the time Mia looks towards it, and he hopes to throw in another high explosive salvo to complement the fire burning away on the MiaYosh, which I believe Mia set. In fact, no, he didn't set it, somebody else set it, but he's going to hopefully finish off the target as they put out their fire. He just needs one more salvo, if not even that, with a fire being set, the MiaYosh not having the fire extinguisher available, and that's the Kraken Unleashed for Mia. But can the team finish the game? Can they win it? That's the real question at this point, because it's all well and good getting Krakens, but can you turn it around? So Mia's team are capturing Objective Charlie at this point, because they know they can get back in this game. The points advantage is really in the enemy team's favour, and they can just keep capping out. But in chasing the Murmansk, the enemy Murmansk seems to have extended out of position to the point they will not be able to get away to safety. I drop the detection and therefore be able to sneak away back to their friendly Texas, who seems to have emigrated all the way up to the northern side of the map and is gradually making their way downwards, we would assume at this point, probably somewhere around Objective Alpha. In fact, they're just south of it, they've just been spotted and they've opened fire. Mia's continuing to rain down the final enemy Murmansk. It's a very difficult target to hit because remember we said earlier the Murmansk is highly manoeuvrable and quite a fast ship, and the enemy Murmansk player is doing a brilliant job of kiting the shots away, whereby Mia is trying to pursue, open out of armour piercing, and it seems as though he really wants to just get that one big salvo that's going to knock that Murmansk out of the game. Where the Murmansk is going to angle away from you with armour piercing, perhaps it's not going to be as easy, and perhaps high explosive would be the better choice in my opinion. But in throwing another salvo out, he's just waiting for that Murmansk to end up either beaching itself or alternatively turning broadside to him, because it's only got one of 2 places to go. It's either got to go broadside, left or right, alternatively smash into the landmass. So Mia continues to open fire on it, making sure not to turn broadside to the Texas incoming fire, particularly armour piercing fire that would shred him. What with Mia's health now being down to just under 10,000, it's well below the starting 26,800, and that Murmansk is just creeping along the landmass at this point. They seem to have almost beached themselves, and Mia's just trying to get the one shot and that's going to count. Can't quite get it at the moment. He gets 2 over penetrations. Can he get the kill? There we go. 6 kills in the bag. That was a nice one. Now it's just one enemy ship left, and with the amount of time remaining, it doesn't look as though Mia's team can just afford to take the central cap and hold it and stay away from the enemy Texas. They're going to have to kill the Texas as well. So moving forward at this point, Mia's moving up. He's taking the lead. 2 battleships behind him. Perhaps he could give them a little bit more time to catch up. But he seems to be on a roll at this point, and he wants to use some high explosives to try and set some more fires on that Texas, which is a very powerful ship if allowed to get a full broadside off on your broadside. Opening fire, we can see that he's trying to get some penetrations with a high explosive and also some fires. Moving in towards Objective Bravo, he turns underneath the incoming fire from the Texas, and it seems as though the Texas' shells all land short of the target or land to the side. Very fortunate there, but also nicely timed to turn in. Having set 1 fire on the Texas, he picks up his high caliber, and Mia's continuing to saunter across Objective Bravo at this point, also throwing down some torpedoes. They're quite far, but if the Texas decides to hold a full broadside and continue on its path, or alternatively turn back in, it may be the case that Mia's going to hit with the torpedoes, but it doesn't look likely. What those torpedoes will do if they're spotted by the Texas is scare the Texas potentially into thinking, I don't want to get any closer to that rather dangerous cruiser that's heading my way. Mia's trying to go for another fire, but the Texas haven't put out their fire, because if you can get that, more bleed damage, and there's the fire. He's got a bit of angling on his armour at this point as well, meaning it was able to deflect some armour piercing shells off of his port side. Angles once again, providing an appropriate angle. He does take some penetrations, particularly one to the bow, but it's not enough to get all the way through the armour, and it means Mia that can just saunter on and continue to lay down the fires on the Texas. That's 2 fires now. That ship is bleeding health like mad. And at this point he gets behind the landmass, off to what is his port side, using it as cover, and if he pulls a little bit distance, he can use the reasonable shell arcs of these guns in order to shoot over potentially, because that's quite a low landmass. And we can see the torpedoes just fall short of their target, although that Texas is going to be quite thankful those torpedoes fell quite short, as Mia's just getting ready to throw in another high explosive salvo, and he's almost captured Objective Bravo as well. So if he holds off and captures Bravo and then helps his teammates burn down that Texas, the game's all theirs, because it'll be 2 battleships to 1, plus the cruise on Mia's team if Mia continues to exist in the match. And what with the Texas burning down It's looking very nice at this point. It looks as though the turnaround's almost complete as Mia becomes detected very briefly, although Texas has got his guns pointed towards him. Oh, this is going to be risky. Is Mia going to get hit as he takes the cap? Well, he takes one glancing blunder. Texas opens fire with a couple more guns very shortly, and it's almost at its last health. Can they win it? Looks like they can, and the game is set and... not quite. Set and... still not quite. No, that Texas is refusing to go down, and another salvo's coming in. Come on, Mia, you got to kill it off. There you go. Ooh, what a match, but Mia helped turn it around for his team. What his total damage output in terms of battle performance amounted to 148,219 HP of damage, and he also picked up 4 achievements along the way. One standard achievement, that being Arsonist, for setting an enemy ship on fire and destroying it. It was the Texas in this case, whereby the fire damage caused to the enemy ship has to exceed 40% of their standard health pool. Mia also picked up the 3 heroic achievements, firstly Confederate, for damage at least 6 enemy ships, whereby the damage caused to each ship must exceed 20% of their normal health pool. He picked up the Kraken Unleashed, whereby in a single battle he destroyed 5 or more enemy ships, or in this case 7. And finally, the High Caliber, whereby Mia damaged at least 4 enemy ships, where the damage caused must exceed 30% of the total health pool of all the ships in the enemy team. Coming on to the team score, we can see that Mia topped his team by a considerable margin in terms of base experience earned, picking up 2,491. One could most definitely say that Mia and his Murmansk carried his team to victory in this instance, whereby his team had to really fight back from a position of disadvantage to one where they were able to close out the win. Having gone effectively 3 caps down at one point, Mia and his colleagues down in the south, either Wyoming and the October Revolution, were able to turn things around over time and help secure the victory, with Mia being at the spearhead, raining down a continuous stream of high explosive 152mm shell fire, bringing about the torpedoes every so often, and frustrating the aim of the enemy ships who returned fire on his rather mobile Murmansk. Coming on to Mia's detailed report, we have 2 key items to note here. First is in the damage caused category, whereby we can see that roughly a third of the total damage output from Mia's ship can be accounted to fires, whereby 14 fires were set, dealing a total of 42,641 HP of damage. This goes to highlight how the Murmansk, with its rather considerable array of 152mm artillery pieces, can continuously set fires over the course of the game, even with both Demolition Expert and IFHE in play, whereby that 11% fire chance is able to make the difference over the course of a battle, particularly when shells are being dropped on enemy battleships time and time again. The other item to note here is in the team play category, whereby we can see that Mia attributed to just over half of his team's capture points, picking up 92 out of 180. Whilst Mia's team didn't really play for caps at any point until the very end, what we can say is that Mia did, when needed, push on to the objectives and take them back for his team, although in the end the win did have to come through sinking all the enemy ships rather than from attributing and accreting capture points over time. And finally, coming on to credits and experience earned, we can see that after additions and deductions, Mia walked away with a grand total of 484,702 silver credits and 9,344 commander experience. To conclude, hopefully today we have witnessed the potency of the Murmansk when it is the top tier ship in a given match, whereby this Soviet premium cruiser has the ability to quickly get into the battle thanks to its top speed, before dropping down a consistent rain of firepower from its 152mm cannon. Their high fire chance, even with IFHE, and you can counter that with Demolition Expert as a captain skill as well, mean that fires are going to be commonplace, and with IFHE in place, penetrating the deck armour of enemy battleships is going to be a problem for the enemy battleships, as they're going to lose their health to your high explosive very quickly. On top of that, when you start to take considerable fire in your Murmansk, you have to realise that you don't have the armour to absorb the fire unless you angle appropriately, but you have the ability to speed away and use your rudder shift to dodge incoming fire and torpedoes. In the case of Mia today, we saw that in action, and if anything, whilst Mia kept his cool under rather unfavourable circumstances, he caused the enemy team to gradually reach their melting point. And so I've been TX141, and if you have enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future World of Warships videos on my channel. And if you haven't already checked out World of Warships, ladies and gentlemen, do keep in mind it's a free-to-play game, and one that I can highly recommend, and if you do want to check it out today, be sure to use the link in the description of this video. But until next time, as always, take care and fair seas.